Next up, I'm going to hit 4 shoots in one place. Los Angeles is a crazy place. I've been there 2 times now, and each time I've tried to get as many shoots in as I possibly can. The first time I went, I only managed to get 1 shoot in. That was, again, golden hour. It's no secret, if you can work a golden hour and the light is with you, you are going to get something that you can't achieve any other way. So we had Lena on the beach, and I shot this thinking that I might actually have things a lot brighter than they turned out being. But when I brought it back into the edit, I found that the Ursa had so much range, I was actually able to pull everything down, and I went for a much more muted look than I'd initially thought I was going to get out of this. There's a lot of kind of really graceful rim light on her. I'm mostly behind her, and it's almost just playing completely in silhouette against the sunset. It actually worked really nicely. It took quite a lot of manipulation in post to get it to where I needed to be, and the only concession to lighting was actually the initial shots in the car. I took a jacket that I had and laid it over the passenger side of the front windscreen so that she had a little bit more neg to camera, so that the light actually gave her a bit more definition. It didn't completely wash out, because at that point we weren't actually at golden hour. We were shooting a good hour or 2 before it got to that point, so the sky was giving a lot of fill in that situation. So I was able to position the car, I was able to just drop that jacket over the front windscreen. I didn't really have much with me because I was, again, solo shooting, but it worked out really nicely. And again, with all the other shots, it is just playing with that sunset light, working on an angle which is going to give you what you need. So at some points, I was dipped right down below these sand dunes so that I could lose the sun from the shot completely, and that kind of helped me with my ratios, so I didn't have the sun directly coming into the lens. And then when we go over the beach, when the sun's really just starting to dip onto the horizon, that's when I was getting all the shots with her and the sunlight in, so you're getting that natural wrap from the sky, but you've also got that direct light just catching for an edge as well. So it's knowing the time that you want and knowing what you're going to be able to do in post to make that sit where you need it to. In October 2019, I was able to pack in 3 shoots on a single day in Los Angeles, all working in different areas of the city at different times. To start off with, I was working with a wonderful dancer, and that was down at Venice Beach. We got there just before sunrise, and we wanted to try and catch that early morning vibe, so coming through from the sort of town area to the beach and just catching as much of the golden hour as we could, but seeing what we could do with a little bit of dance and movement flowing through from one location to the next. I did have my Lastolite HALO with me on this, and because, again, I'm running with a simple rig, easy rig, Ursa Mini, follow focus, I was able to strap the HALO onto the side of my setup so that I'm just catching a little bit of light into the model's face and the eyes so that we don't just go to complete silhouette. If we compare that to the shoot that I did previously on the beach at Zuma, we see a very different vibe. We've got more in the model's face there, the model is facing the camera more, we're trying to catch light in the eyes, and we're not going with complete silhouette. So it's something which could have had that same silhouette vibe, but because we're able to bring in that little bit of bounce, it just lifts everything, and it changes the feel of it, makes it feel a little bit more high-key, makes it feel a little bit happier than perhaps the other video did, just with the addition of a simple halo reflector in there. With that first shoot, obviously, I'm fortunate enough to be able to say, yes, let's shoot at sunrise for this. With the second shoot on that day, not so much. Because of the timings and because of how everything worked out, I was in downtown LA, around the Ace Hotel where I was staying, and for my second shoot, it was broad daylight, midday sun, really harsh.
Move with the rhythm, shake it up, stop when the clock hits 13. You've been working, but you're flirting with the weekend. You can freak out. 1 in a million. You're a gem shine when the light grows dim. Sing 1, 2, 3, 4. Cause no one can do it like we do it, like we do it, like we do it. Cause no one can do it like we do it, like we do it, like we do it. Cause no one can do it like we do it, like we do it, like we do it.
I didn't have the space that I had down at Venice Beach. Instead of that, I ended up using the architecture that was all around us. You might wonder how you can use architecture to achieve a better light in your shot, but it's actually quite easy in a city. The way that I did this was to work in a covered area which had scaffolding up, so that I knew immediately at certain times of day I wasn't going to get direct light coming into that. I was just going to have soft skylight wrapping around and bounce off the buildings and the road, and one side would then be completely down as well, so you can control in that sense how your frame looks, because you know that you're not going to get direct sunlight and you know which angle it's going to be coming in from. The second way that I controlled light in this setup, bearing in mind I had no reflector for this because I figured that it would be too cumbersome to try and move through the streets with the reflector popping out the side of my camera like this as well, and so I just decided not to go with that at all. Sometimes that's important, realizing what the limitations of your shoot should be so that you can more effectively use the other options available to you. The second way that I controlled how my frame looked with the architecture was actually using bounce off buildings. Now this is something which you may or may not have noticed, but if you're in a city and you're walking on the street, often the sun will hit windows on a high-rise building and bounce it down into the street. So you get these crazy areas of bounce light, which you can really use to your advantage, because the bounce light's coming in, hitting a building just here, and illuminating a corner of a block. Now immediately, because the sun is on this side, you're in shade because you're covered by the other buildings on this block. So you've got this bounce light coming in, and then you just got all this soft wrap from the sky and the area around you. You don't have anything competing with that, and it means that you can actually end up with a really nicely backlit scene that isn't too harsh. Because that level's been taken down, it's bouncing off glass and it's not transmitting the entire power of the sun, you get this wonderful in-between ratio which feels a little bit more like something you would do if you were lighting. And the levels that you're talking about that you're getting in return, even if I had a crew and I had a lot of time to set it up, I'd be talking about using like an 18K to get that kind of light on the back of a subject, especially over a large area, because again, we're covering like 15 to 20 square meters with this light, so you can really move through it. And because it's so far away, the return from the building is not going to fall off that greatly over the space that you're talking about because it's so far away. So it's actually a really effective way of using the architecture to improve the way that your frame will look. And it doesn't take all that much to achieve this. You just got to scout your locations, know what you're looking for, and even if you're just running and gunning, you don't know where you're going, just looking at where the sun is, where the buildings are, you're going to notice it really quickly and be able to bounce around, getting those really cool backlit scenes without having to set anything up, without having to bounce anything, and using everything that's available to you for free on a minimal crew. So all of this, again, I'm just on the easy rig, only me running around and the model working as well, no help from anyone else, and you can achieve something that actually looks kind of cool if you think about it. The final shoot I did in LA, again, was during a very harsh time of day. Didn't have the architecture around to riff off this time. We were working around Beverly Hills, so instead I ended up using what was available in nature to break up the harsh sunlight.
In my weakest moment, you call me by name, you call me wide open. I wish I never met you.
We're working under trees and trying to stay backlit. Staying backlit is a very good way of making sure that there's no harsh light on your model's faces and it's just giving you a rim light. Now obviously at certain times of day that's going to look super harsh and you're going to get lots of flyaway hairs showing up, But if you work it in the right way and you've got a little bit of a mottled effect with trees breaking up the harshness, then it can actually work okay. As a preference, I would always aim for lower light and something that I can control a bit more. If you have to work with super harsh overhead light and there's no way of avoiding it, then you can do a couple of things to make your life a little bit easier. Isolate areas where you're going to be able to move around and not be moving in and out of that harsh light. Make sure that you're not transiting sort of so that it's a half light coming across your model's face, because immediately that's going to give you lots of really harsh shadows. And in my case, my model's wearing sunglasses, so we could have gotten away with it because you're not going to see those nasty shadows under the eye, but it's still really hard, and unless it's absolutely right, it's going to be a little bit nasty and hard to work with. The way I approached this was twofold. We're working just outside the Beverly Hills Hotel, and we had access to the trees and the boulevards down there, and there was also a park. So we worked up and down underneath the canopy of the trees, and then we moved over to the park. All of this is backlit. All of this is using those trees to break up the backlight a little bit as well. Now we've also got that fill happening from the sky over the top, so it actually works out quite nicely. The look that I was going for with this was a little bit different as well. I wanted it to seem sort of flary and a little bit magical. To do that, I was using a flare stick in front of the lens. I had a little Manfrotto 244 arm just clamped on there to hold it in place, and then I was able to move that back and forth so that we get an in-camera natural flare effect. Now that catches a little bit the sunlight that's coming in because we're backlit, so the sun is going to be hitting the lens if I'm low enough, and at midday you have to go pretty low to get that shot. So you've got to be conscious of how your model's going to look at that super low angle. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. In my case, for a couple of the shots it was okay, but I didn't want to overdo it. So using that flare stick just to give everything a hazier look in camera really worked out. It means that you're going from those really hard, bright skies in the back to the what could be very, very dark frontal shot. But by using the flare stick, you kind of milk out the sensor a little bit, so it's not getting as much contrast into the shot, baked in at the sensor level, as it would otherwise get. Now that plays to your advantage because it softens everything and it kicks light in different directions, but it feels organic because it's something that's happening as you're moving physically. And of course, I am using an easy rig just here. It's not a perfectly smooth shot. Being able to move around with the lens, have that react to the conditions, the sunlight, have the flare stick also reacting to the conditions, and having all of that captured on the sensor means that in post, if you do anything in the grade to accentuate those flares and give it a slightly pastel-y, milky look, it just knits together in a very pleasing way. So compared to the other two shoots, this one looks completely different, and for each of them indeed, I was trying to get a different look. So if we took the 4 as a set, we've got the very first shoot that I did in LA, which was basically entirely silhouette. We got the second shoot, which was all morning sun, could have been silhouette, but because I had the bounce in there, I was able to make it a lot more high key and happy. Third shoot, again harsh, midday sun, but I was able to use the architecture to get a backlit effect and keep the general ambient fill as our key light for our subject, so that worked really nicely. And then the fourth shoot, really harsh overhead, using the trees to break it up, using the flare stick and the lens to interact with what the sunlight was doing and milk everything out to give you that really hazy look. So each of the 3 has its own distinct look, and they're all really simple. It's all one camera, one operator, maybe a little bit of bounce on one of them, but most of them is just using the environment and the camera movement and the framing, maybe with a flare stick, that's a little bit of a cheat, to get that effective look that I was going for. And I didn't want to do the same look every single time. I wanted to try to experiment where I didn't have access to all of my team, I didn't have access to all of my equipment that I would normally want to take out. I was still able to interpret that in an interesting way and have a lot of fun with it. I think that's another important thing. Enjoy what you're doing and treat it as a learning experience. I did know roughly what I was going for, but at the same time, it was interesting to see how I could push myself and how we could, again, when we get it back in post, interpret what I'd done on the fly, run and gun in LA, to get something really premium feeling out of it.